What is going on, guys? Hope you're having a fantastic week. Today is not Sunday Night Live. You know that we are doing this on a different day than usual. Ryan had some things come up this past Sunday, but tonight we're going to have a whole lot of fun because we've invited my friend Jonathan to join us, and Ryan's friend. I guess he's your friend too, man.
I mean, however you want to look at it, Michael.
Yeah,
however
dude.
you want to do that.
Jonathan, welcome, man. So glad to have you. We're going to have you on here. I have a feeling people are going to really love you, dude. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Been playing with the Epson LS 12,000 since M-Wave. I took that one home with me. Thank you, Ryan. Just to
nice. So you've been having fun with that?
Dialing it in. I like it a lot.
I had a guy run up to me during M-Wave, and he sat down after the demonstration, or not demonstration, but the comparison between that. And I think it was the JVC NZ7. And he ran up to me, sat down next to me. He said, Michael, I came and I basically, I got everything I came for. He said, I'm buying that Epson. And he loved it, man. So that was super cool. And, but man, so Jonathan, folks in the chat, you may not know who Jonathan is. I had an opportunity. How long ago has it been? Has it been a year?
December, I think. So not quite.
Not a year.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I flew up to Kansas City, stayed with Jonathan and his sweet family. He's got an incredible home theater, which you can see part of that right behind him. Made a video on his. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely check that out on the channel. But Jonathan is just an incredible man. He's a great people person. He's a great host. We actually had some of the folks from M-Wave come over to his home and be able to enjoy his home theater. And so we thought it'd be great to bring him on tonight and to kind of join in the conversation. We're going to jump into this in just a minute, but we're going to be talking about tonight 3 tips to maximize your home theater. And then after that, we'll answer your questions. But Jonathan, for the folks that don't know you, man, tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you've got in your theater room, because I see some really cool stuff behind you.
Sure. I'll keep it short. My name's Jonathan, about mid-40-year-old range. I bought
This isn't a Tinder profile, Jonathan.
Yeah. I'll keep it short. I just say I've been in home theater for about 25 years. Maybe it started in late high school, like my first system from a pawn shop, and then upgraded quickly from there. Been through a lot of different gear over the years. Used to switch speakers and receivers and projectors and all that stuff for a few years. Just kind of enjoying the hobby. Met a lot of guys around here in Kansas City. We have a good group. We go out like once a month to each other's houses and play around, listen to each other's gear, listen to upgrades, see what all's there. It's a good time.
Yeah,
we had one on Sunday, actually.
Yeah. Ryan and I were there. And one of the new guys that kind of has just joined in the last couple months. He opened up his house to the
very cool
experience. So it's good.
So Jonathan, y'all have a great, and we've shared this on the channel, y'all got a great community over on the AVS forum. So if you guys are interested in seeing what they're up to, or if you're in that area in Kansas City, and you also have some people from, is it Missouri?
Well, yeah.
That come over.
Right.
So
well, Jonathan's in Missouri.
Right.
Okay.
Kansas City straddles the state line.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have the metro area.
Sure. It was kind of funny because when I flew up there, I went to somebody's home and I was doing a home theater tour, and they're like, and I shared, hey, we're in Kansas City. And they're like, hold up. Are you going to like share like which Kansas City this is? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea, man. So I figured out, man, there's kind of like some rivalry there, man. It was fun rivalry, but I think they're proud of whether they're in Kansas or they're in Missouri.
Well, it actually goes all the way back to the Civil War. There's a lot of blood feud and hatred.
Gotcha.
Going all the way back there, where some people out of Missouri actually came in and burned Lawrence to the ground. So there's there's some stuff that goes back a long ways, but that's well in the past.
I
secretly harbor a lot of hate for Jonathan. He just doesn't know it.
Wait a minute.
You're just jealous of his cool theater, man.
Now I see why I was invited on here.
Yeah, just totally dunk on Jonathan the entire time. Also for crapping all over my ruse setup on Sunday.
Not your Rue setup, just Rue. Go ahead.
Super funny, man. Tristan says he loves the tour, your home theater tour. Your speakers are amazing. And Jonathan's got a very interesting setup. He's got line arrays from JBL. And as you can see around him, he's got all identical speakers for side surrounds, front LCR, Atmos speakers. And then up front, you can't see them all, but there are 5 18-inch subwoofers And then right directly behind his theater seats where his chair is, he's got 3 more. So he's got 8 18s. 3 of them are near field. Absolutely killer setup. So, but anyway, so let me say hi to some folks in the chat. James, appreciate you being here, man. Tristan's here, of course. T1AA, Richard, Dan's in the house. Christian, good to see you guys. Daniel, appreciate y'all, man. So we're going to have some fun tonight. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the topic. So we're talking about 3 tips to maximize your home theater. And then after we talk about that for a few minutes, then we'll jump into some questions. So if you've got a question, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'll be starring those and then coming back to them once we kind of talk about this. So fellas, we're going to dive into this. What are some tips? We've kind of talked backstage, 3 things that we're going to be talking about. So Ryan, let's name one of them. What's the first thing you want to talk about?
Positioning.
Okay. So talking about speaker positioning and, looking at Jonathan's, it's kind of interesting. You can kind of see that even his subwoofers, they're in a specific position. They're not straight. He's even got them curved. I guarantee he didn't just throw his 3 18s anywhere. He didn't just slap his speakers up on the wall and go, okay, they look good there. So why is speaker positioning so important, fellas?
Jonathan, you want to start since we're talking about kind of using your theater as an example?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of time and energy and effort behind it trying to make it all maximized. So you got to get yourself a calibrated mic, either use REW or OmniMic or the tool of your choice. You got to see what's going on. Michael mentioned my subs. They're in a half circle up there because that's where they measured best. I tried them all over the place. I had all 8 up front. I had 4 up front. I had like different arrangements of stacking and groups of 2s and 3s, and literally the best frequency response without using any EQ, just raw native, was that half circle up there.
Nice.
And I have a real nice flat response down to about 7 hertz with that. And then the 3 near field just give me that extra tactile feel behind. So that's a lot of experimentation. Originally, I just thought I'll just put all 8 of them up front and it'll look awesome because it's like a massive wall of subs.
Just a wall of subs, man.
Just like all along the floor, but it didn't measure right.
Gotcha.
Because of nodes and knolls in the room, there was a couple places in the frequency response that were just like 7 or 9 dB high or low instead of a flat frequency response. Mm-hmm. That's not where you want to start because then you're going to have to use EQ and eat up extra amplifier power and all that kind of stuff for it. So playing around with it, got me what I needed. And you don't know what those are. It'd be impossible to do what they call like you can get an entrance to it with like a sub crawl where you put the subwoofer on your seat. Sure. And you walk around the room and see where it sounds the best. And that's where you put your sub.
Yeah.
But that's really rough.
I think it might work for maybe 1 subwoofer, but there's no way you could do that with 8 subwoofers.
And
you're literally guessing.
It. Absolutely. So yeah, a mic's going to cost you $100 and some time to learn REW, or if you want something a little bit quicker, you can go with like OmniMic for $300.
There he goes. There it goes. There's the drop right there.
World of difference. So yeah, then once you have it, then it's just like, spend a little time and match it up. And it's not just with subs. The speakers, I had them 6 or 8 inches lower. I was like, I feel like I want them a little higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to tear up my drywall and raise them a little bit. And I like the results. The ceiling placement, I put them on French cleats so I could slide them left and right and figure out exactly where they needed to be.
Nice.
It's all just like dialing in instead of just sticking them there and hoping.
Right.
Yeah. I think one thing that, especially when people have because I found this out on my channel, probably 2/3 of my audience, and this was kind of surprising to me, 2/3 of my audience have a home theater in a living room. So most of them are using a TV. And so not ideally, but a lot of times when you're putting together a home theater, especially in a living room, sometimes you're kind of limited to where you can put things. And so oftentimes you just put them where they look best. But the problem is they don't always measure the best there. And so I think there's, sometimes you got to have some give and take there, especially with the wife. But in your case, you got a basement. You can do kind of whatever you want and put them wherever you want. But I think placement can make a huge difference. I know even if you take 2 speakers, let's say I posted a video today and I talked about how a lot of people just have TV speakers. They haven't even gotten to the level of getting past those. And so I'm trying to get and encourage these guys that are new into the hobby, what would the next step be? Well, that'd be a sound bar. They have their place. The next step might be just 2 powered speakers, and maybe add a subwoofer. That'd be a cool system for, a nice upgrade.
Sure.
And then from there, you could go as big as you want in the actual home theater and doing a 5.1, 7.1, 11.1, whatever you want. But even just positioning 2 speakers, it really matters how far they are from the wall, how far, they are apart, the distance they are from you, all of those things. And I found that even moving my 2 speakers in my living room, whether it's moving them out away from the wall, away from each other, or even towing them in, which is where you kind of angle them towards you. I mean, we're talking inches can make a big difference.
Correct.
Ryan, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, and just kind of elaborate on what we were talking about, why this makes a big difference. And the reason, especially when Jonathan was talking about subwoofers, and he alluded to and talked briefly about nulls, but when you get into positions with room modes, with nulls and things like that, you can't EQ out of those. They just turn into room sucks. And if you try and EQ out, you can create other anomalies that can be detrimental to your experience. So the way around that with what Jonathan has done is both positioning and adding more subwoofers, which we can kind of throw into positioning. So having the positions change and adding more subwoofers allows you to alleviate the nulls that can be created or are caused by your room. And then I was reading through chat and I saw something about speaker position on the wall. And yeah, there is a lot of benefit to having a speaker properly placed as it goes to Dolby spec, but that isn't always necessarily the best place in your room because everybody's room is different. And just because it's Dolby spec, right, that doesn't mean it's going to produce the best sound environment for your particular space. And they're more than likely, as Jonathan said when he was moving his speakers on French cleats on the ceiling or moving them up 6 inches, there's a better position, right, that can be found that may not, and Jonathan, yours may be on to spec, that may not be to spec, that gives you a better experience. And then coupling that with speakers and subwoofers interacting with each other, like if you have like frequencies firing into each other, they can cancel and cause issues there. But there's just a bunch of things that need to be taken into consideration that positioning and, in Jonathan's case, adding more subwoofers can correct, which I think a lot of people have a tendency to overlook. And it's just subwoofer is going to be here, and that's where it sits for the rest of its life.
Correct.
Sure, man. So definitely speaker positioning matters. So part of it is play with it. Definitely use the Dolby, what do they call them? The white papers to try to help you figure out where best to put those.
I think those are good references.
Good, definitely a good place to start. Audio Devices even got a tool that they've added some enhancements to. That's pretty slick, man. You can build your home theater and draw it out literally in a few minutes. It's crazy.
Their new tool is pretty cool.
I went over to.
Have you seen their new tool?
I have. It's pretty exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've added some new features like front wides so that you can do that. They also have the ability to show if you've got floor standing speakers or even like an LCR behind an acoustic transparent screen. And it'll show you everything. If you move your couch too far forward, it's going to turn red and go, that's probably not the ideal place. Or if your speakers are not the right position, they're going to show you those errors. But it's definitely pretty slick. But there's some great resources out there. And the good thing is they're free. So definitely, I think, having your speakers positioned and spending some time figuring out where they sound best and measure best. Jonathan, you mentioned something that I don't hear very often. Typically, a lot of times when we talk about calibration microphones, figuring out where the best position is for our speakers. Of course, the UMic one from many DSPs, a go-to. I think Dayton Audio makes one that's pretty inexpensive. But you mentioned an Omni mic. Why did you go with that? And I kind of think that's a higher end model, I'm assuming. So
it's not that much more expensive. It is more expensive, but I would buy it again. This is my second one because my first one got dropped in the mud by my daughter when I was outdoor measuring some speakers outside on the ground plane.
Wow.
but I'd buy it again if it broke again because all right. So originally I bought it probably in 2011, and at the time it did real-time analysis where REW did not, and so you play a track off a CD or off an MP3 or whatever digital form you want. You don't have to hook anything up to your receiver. The SPL calibration is on the mic. And so you've got your frequency response, and it's just as fast as the sine sweeps happen. So all I have to do, if I walk in someone's room to measure it, hand them a CD, they push play, and I'm recording. And I've got my frequency response sweep. So that allows me to then walk around the room in real time and watch my graph change. I can put the display up on the projected screen, or with my laptop, walk around. Mm-hmm. I can immediately tell, hey, this is the best place for sub, because I'm watching that line move and change in real time. I'm not having to stop each time. And I hear now that RAW has that capability. I haven't kept up with RAW. I think RAW has made a lot of advancements and has a lot of features that OmniMic doesn't at this point. But OmniMic is just so easy to use that even if you're really green to the hobby, you can pick up and learn so much with it. To your previous point, when you were saying move things around, make sure you guys turn off your auto EQ that's in place before you start moving things around, because whatever auto EQ did for that position, if you move the speaker 6 inches over or foot over, may not be appropriate.
Well, to that point, I'm going to go back to what happened on Sunday. Auto EQ, or what you're seeing from room correction, isn't always the best scenario. It can actually be a detractor from your system, depending on what it does. From what we saw it do to the subs over at Keith's house on Sunday, I mean, it was not better than what we were seeing for them without EQ, at least in my opinion.
You're right.
And that's something that I think a lot of people need to consider, that just because you can run EQ does not necessarily mean it's going to make everything better, because there's a lot of things it has to consider, and there's a lot of things that it can get wrong.
And Jonathan, in your setup, you don't even run EQ, right?
Correct.
I don't either now.
Oh, look at you, dude. That's pretty wild, because we're so used to, we run Odyssey, we run Direct Live, we run Wipeout or whatever room correction you have. But Jonathan found that it actually measured better in his room, and his speakers just really didn't need EQ. Now, his are way different. They have a 150-degree dispersion pattern. So it's almost 180 degrees. It's crazy. So what's awesome, you can literally walk around anywhere in his room, and it sounds almost identical. It's the strangest thing in a good way. I literally have never heard anything more immersive. Usually you get off axis from speakers, and you can tell it just sounds different. But, man, your room's definitely and truly unique. I don't see too many people running line arrays in their home theater, which is super, super cool. So Richard mentions he was at M-Wave. He says, love the idea of fixing the null with another sub, some words to live by. So definitely.
That's the best way to do it. More subs equals better, right?
Yeah. I think they even said like the perfect amount of subs is infinite.
Right.
And I know it sounds weird, but basically the more subwoofers you have, the more it's going to fix those issues in your room if they're properly placed and calibrated, and you got them what do you call it, time aligned and so forth. So, but definitely some good advice there. So speaker placement's one. What's the second one, Ryan?
Man, you're throwing me on this?
Yeah, you came up with them. SPL.
I don't even really remember, but SPL.
SPL, level matching.
You did it yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm, kind of try to keep the conversation going. So one thing that I found in my theater room, and I've done a video on this, is the importance of level matching. Typically, if you do run your auto EQ, it's going to do its best to try to match your speakers and have them the same volume at your listening position. Problem is, it doesn't always get them right. And in my theater room, my side surrounds and my rear surrounds, it never gets them right. And I think the biggest reason is I usually have my front 3 speakers when I had the Klipsch Scalas, and now with my JTR 212 HTRs or JTR Captivator. Anyway, Noesis, I said it wrong. JTR Noesis 212 HTR. That's just a mouthful. Both of those types of speakers are very efficient. And so my rear speakers aren't as efficient. And I think it just throws Odyssey off. Like, it doesn't know exactly what to do with that. And so I found using an SPL meter. Mm-hmm. I bought one. It's an old school Radio Shack analog meter with the, the little, the dot or the, whatever, what do you call that thing?
It's the analog needle.
Yeah, the needle. That's what it is. So the needle, I don't even have the digital version, but it works. I'm able to dial those in and get them all the same level. And to me, it just adds an extra layer of immersiveness. I don't have surrounds that are too high. I don't have my center channel that's too low. They're all matched. And then from there, I think there is some room for preference. I think there are some guys out there that prefer to bump up their surrounds a little bit, or maybe bump up their Atmos a little bit. And that's preference. But I think getting those level match, I think is a great starting point. I think it's really important to do so. What do y'all think?
I agree.
Well, give me some feedback, man. What else?
I don't know. I don't have any other feedback. I think it's important just to level match. And I guess I will say back to room correction can and will get your levels wrong. So it's very important after you do a level match, before you do room correction, to then go back through and do it again after you're done. Jonathan, you got anything?
I do. Can you share a link?
So
Michael,
down.
if I send you a link?
Yeah, that's fine.
Here, I'll just put it in chat.
Okay.
So it should be it's in the YouTube chat, I think.
You might have to go to over on the right, because mine's going to block it probably. Over on the private chat, you see that tab?
Yeah.
Click that and paste it in there, and then I can copy it and paste it.
Roger. There you go.
Perfect. All right, let's copy this.
So I'd be curious, and maybe Ryan, maybe you heard and maybe you didn't. I know you weren't directly setting up the auto EQ at Imwave, but we did an auto EQ in 2014, and that's been quite a while ago now, 8 years ago. But if you pull that up and go to, I think it's post 208 where the results are posted, real quickly for your audience, they'll find this kind of amazing, I think. We used drum stands in the room to make sure the mic positions were in the exact same place for every one of these auto EQ runs. We ran like 6 or 8 receivers in that test. Everything was as evenly, fairly matched as it could be, same exact positions. And the results were as much as 20 dB difference.
Yeah.
Wow.
When they're calibrated for reference and you're supposed to have that standard, 20 dB is like,
that's huge.
It's ridiculously different. And that's what we saw. I mean, the bass was different, the highs were different. So even if that auto EQ routine level matched within its own speakers, like say even if it did well and got those all matched, relative to another standard, you don't know where you're at without an SPL meter like you're talking, Michael, or without, like a Omnimic or REW setup.
Sure.
You don't know where you're at.
When we did this at M-Wave, we used the recommended mic positions. So we did it a little bit differently, but then we didn't touch and go back and level match because we figured that most people that do this stuff aren't going to do that. They're not going to go back and do the SPL level match afterwards. And what we found, and this was very indicative of what people ended up liking, was that certain room corrections were actually handling the curves very differently. Like ARC, for example, was boosting the low frequency. And you guys know as much as I that typically any system with more low frequency is going to be the one that's universally more liked. So we noticed that quite heavily throughout the experience. And lesson learned, maybe next time we'll SPL level match them, but we figured, hey, most people aren't going to do this. But that was a very good showcase of why it's important to do that, because then it would have been down to, if we would have done that, how they were handling the EQ and what they were doing to the frequencies instead of, well, I guess that's the same as SPLs, but it would have been a lot more nuanced instead of as in your face as not having them level matched.
Yeah. Dan even says he found that when he runs Odyssey, his distances are almost spot on, but he still needs to adjust the dBs for half of his speakers. Like, that's how off it is. And so definitely, guys, I highly encourage you. And even if you don't have an SPL meter, like a dedicated SPL meter, this is a good starting point. Get your phone, download a SPL meter. It's not the most accurate, but I think relatively speaking, it should be able to get all of your speakers the same level. Would y'all agree?
Yeah, it's kind of a ballpark.
It's a good starting point.
It's a good ballpark. Something else to consider is that while room correction can be good, what I've noticed running DIRAC, and maybe it's the version that I've been running, room correction also can mess up your delays. And if your delays get messed up, it can totally screw up your imaging, and it can totally mess up and give you increased distortion because you have sound arriving at different time points that can be very disorienting. So it's really important that people don't just take room correction when it finishes and just be like, all right, I'm done, and throw their hands up and enjoy the experience. That's very easy to do, and you can do that, but you're going to get a much better home theater experience if you go back and double check whatever room correction is doing, just to make sure what it's done is appropriate.
Sure thing.
I think it can be something as simple as your crossover point too. I've had good luck with Odyssey as far as setting distances, and there's another little caveat trail that I'll briefly mention there. some people see, hey, it set my subwoofer to 12 feet or whatever. My subwoofer's 5 feet away. I'm going to knock that back down. Don't do that, because the auto EQ is traditionally pretty good at determining distances, and it's calculated in your amp latency and any processing delays and that kind of stuff. And even though it says it's not the physical distance that you'd expect, it's probably got it more right than you're going to be able to do just by guessing on the physical distance, because all this electronic has a little bit of latency built in, and you have to deal with that. As far as the crossover point that I was mentioning a second ago, forever when I was using the different Denons that I've gone through, it would always set my crossover point to a lower point, and when I measured it with the Omni mic, I would have like a little dip at that crossover point that might be like 5 or 6 dB. In crossing over the mains, it would pick 70, for instance. Well, if I just bump that to 90, and this is just experimenting, right? It's nothing magical about 90. It's just my room, my equipment, 90 works. I bumped that to 90 in the crossover for all speakers, and all of a sudden now I have no bump there or no dip there, and it's just a nice smooth transition between the two. So, Odyssey got that wrong. It's not something it should get wrong, or you'd think it get wrong, but it reliably did get it wrong.
Yeah. I think room correction, they're not perfect. And so we have to go back and, like you said, test that and see via measurements, did it get that right? I'm going to throw this up here. Usually, we'll take questions at the end, but this pertains to what we're talking about here. So I think it's really appropriate. So why does the SPL meter measure the sub like 10 dB lower than the rest? He says he has it set to slow and C weight.
It shouldn't be.
No.
Your subs might actually be 10 dB lower than the rest if that's what you're measuring. Or you might have a faulty SPL meter, possibly too.
Your SPL meter may be hearing frequencies that you can't. And that's something else that you need to consider, is that it's probably reading correctly. And if you're just gauging this on what you can hear, it's probably reading things that you can't hear using your human ears.
Yeah.
So that's just almost universally, you're always going to assume that subs are a lower volume when you listen to them, because you can't hear a lot of the stuff they're outputting. And I think that's a big reason why we increase the SPL level of our low frequency.
Yeah. Super, super cool. So we got two things. So we talked about speaker positioning, the importance of that. We've talked about the importance of level matching your speakers and getting those all. Now, do you always keep everything level?
I do, but that's preference. I know a couple people that bring it up. They'll
run
they'll
20 dB hot. 20 dB hot on the subs.
I thought you were talking about the main speakers.
Well, Jonathan's just trying to cover for himself.
This guy right here
runs all those really hot. That's just subs. You go away. And since that was, I've since changed. I've changed that. That when you guys saw that at M-Wave, that was all room corrected, and I've moved away from that. And the room sounds totally different now. Yeah. It was a huge difference. And immediately when I did it, I was like, Jonathan, I see why you do what you do. Because and I can flip back and forth between them, and it's room correction just sounds muddy when I move back to it. And I've got some more work to do to double check. My new mic arrived a couple days ago, so I've got some work to do to check delays and stuff, but it sounds much better already, at least in my opinion.
Cool. Rooster, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. There's three kind of common ones. The mini DSP U mic -1. They even have a -2 now. It's a newer mic. A lot of guys use a Dayton audio microphone, and then Jonathan uses an Omni mic. So
it's also
definitely
by Dayton Audio. It's another offering from them.
Okay, cool. So definitely, and so that's going to run you say between $89 to how much is the Omni mic?
Mic's $300.
Okay, so it's a couple hundred more. So. All right. So good question. All right. So we got those two out of the way. And then the third thing that you can do to optimize your home theater is, what is it, Ryan?
EQ.
All right. So EQ. So how important is EQ? So the first probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the show, we've been talking about how you actually prefer not to EQ. So what is your thoughts there?
It's not that I prefer not to EQ. It's that I prefer not to have it auto EQ'd, right? Gotcha. So there's a difference there. I'm going to go back, and I need to go back and do manual EQ.
Gotcha.
But having Dirac do it, Dirac's good. I think it's just running into some problems. So that's really what I meant. EQ is very important for leveling things out, fixing some things that are happening, things that are pumped, things that are low. You can really only do a little bit. You don't want to oversaturate a lot of this stuff because that can lead to its own problems.
Yeah.
But EQ is very important, I think, for making a much more well-rounded listening experience.
Yeah. I think Odyssey is even making some strides to providing those guys that like yourself that really want to dive deep and take a look at the measurements with their new, I guess you'd call it an upgrade to Odyssey. You know, we have the $20 app that gives you some flexibility, but honestly, it's still pretty limited. But then now they've got I always forget the name of it, but it's like Odyssey Multi-X. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. For the
I
$200
think so.
upgrade.
It's a couple $100. I know Joe from Joe and Tell has been diving into that. He loves it. He's been able to really, and he likes doing what you're talking about, just the manual EQ. He doesn't run Odyssey. He just dives in there, uses the calibrated mic, sees what it's measuring, and then he begins to adjust manually. It's definitely a lot of work that way, but it gives you a ton of flexibility. So,
anything to add there, Jonathan?
Yeah, I if you're doing the auto EQ or if you're trying to EQ for a seat, and I talked to this in Youthman's video, so it's probably going to be rehashed for anyone who's seen that. I feel like you can pretty easily go into the trap where you're EQing to your primary seat at the detriment to the seats surrounding you.
yeah.
So if you care about the listening experience for all the seats in your room or for the row behind you or whatnot,
Yeah.
less is more in the EQ realm. Because just to put a bow on it, let's say that my main seat needs 5 dB at 70 hertz because of a null for the subwoofer, and I add that 5 dB. Well, a seat or two over, maybe they're already 5 dB hot because of that same room interaction, and now you've added 5 dB more. So now they're 10 dB hot at 70 hertz, and their hair is like uncomfortably moving every time the bass drum hits.
It's part of the experience.
Yeah.
Well, you've all probably, I mean, maybe not, but people who visit different theaters, they've certainly encountered that, where you go to the back row or something, and it's so hot, the bass is completely different than the front row.
Mm-hmm.
You can minimize that by doing less EQ.
Gotcha.
Or by adding more subs where there's, you know.
But you can also sometimes fix that using EQ depending on the situation. To an extent. I don't think you can fix it completely.
If it's boomy.
When you EQ, try to average in multiple placements instead of just doing a single seat, unless you're the only person in your theater and you don't care about anybody else. But if you do care about other theater seats,
he's pretty selfish, man.
Well, given how my speakers are set up, I can't really do it another way.
Yeah. So before we jump into some questions, Fred says, man, your red speakers, Jonathan, are so cool. So what are the model numbers on those? I'm going to make you big here.
They're JBL CBT 70J1, and the lights are an afterthought. They're not, of course, included. These are JBL Pro audio speakers, and AMC Prime is where I first saw them. And AMC Prime had done something similar with the lights. So it's just a RGB 50/50 strip, like they're $20 for a strip that's 12 foot long or something.
And man, we all know that you were in that Dolby Prime theater and ripped those off the walls. Those are the ones from the theater. Okay, we all know. I'm just thinking of Jonathan looking around during the movie, and it's progressively getting more quiet as he takes them off the walls.
That's funny.
That's hilarious, man. But yeah, so it definitely was not an afterthought, I don't think, because it was very well thought out. And I love it, man. He can change the colors, and you even leave them on when you're watching a movie, which normally most people would say, why would you do that? But he uses red typically, and he turns it down to what, 10%?
5%.
5%. So, I mean, you can barely see them, but it just adds a cool vibe. And I love seeing those when we're listening to music at your house, man. So that's a whole lot of fun. Well, if you guys have additional questions, we're going to start answering those. So hopefully you found those 3 tips helpful. We're going to keep this live stream to 1 hour. I know Ryan's got he has a meeting right after this, so we're gonna finish.
You got videos to make.
Oh yeah, man! I got 3 videos and to edit. Just posted one live today, and then I've got some stuff I've got to take care of tomorrow. So it's definitely busy time. But James Clark says, "Youth Man, always a pleasure to watch your videos and gain knowledge. I hope to one day be featured on one of your home theater tours. I'm local, dude. That's super exciting." Best thing to do, reach out to me through my website, which is hometheatertours.com. Submit your home theater there. I'm still doing the Florida home theater tour. I haven't finished that. I just had to take a little break to get some other videos out there. and I'm trying to space those out. I thought maybe doing them back to back to back was ideal, but honestly, it kind of hurts the growth of the channel. And I think the reason why is my audience loves it, but those types of videos don't reach new people. And that's one of the reasons why I made the video today, is I'm trying to reach more people that are getting into this hobby and get them interested and give them some basic foundational information, and then provide them with some additional content that dives a little bit deeper, like what we're talking about tonight. So definitely reach out to me, or even on my Facebook. Hit me up. I've got a lot of people that I connect with, but I'd love to connect with you, man. That's awesome. So another one from James. He says, I upgraded from a JVC RS45U, not familiar with that model, to an Epson 5040 UB. That was my third projector. Is it possible to push 4K 60 HDR to a 5040? Now, Jonathan, you had the 5040, right?
I have one in my room here. No. You can. It has. You get three. You get two out of the three. You can either have 4K E shift. You can have 60 frames per second, or you can have HDR. You can't have all three.
Now, is the restriction on HDR? Does it not do BT 2020?
No. It has its own flavor. The problem is it has like a 10 megabit per second HDMI chipset instead of 18, which is 18 is required for all three. So it was one of the early ones, right on that edge when they kind of flipped over, and they didn't put a full bandwidth HDMI chip in it.
So you can't even get around that by using external tone mapping. It's a limit on bit depth.
Correct. So
I see.
So it's not really that big of a thing except for gaming, right? Because most content for movies isn't 60 frames per second. It can do 4K 24 hertz HDR.
Maybe James really likes Gemini Man. Okay, let's not downplay.
That was like the one video that came out. Yeah.
James, that 5040 UB is a nice projector. It's what was featured in that M-Wave demo that we did with Youthman in December. Yeah. There's no shame in it, but it can't do what you're asking. Yeah. You got to go to the next generation for that.
Cool. And so what would that be? Now, he just got it, so we probably shouldn't even tell him, because now he's going to be like, dang it, I got to get this next one.
I still think it's an awesome price for performance projector. I mean, there's nothing better.
Yeah. It's a beautiful projector. So
is that 50 is the next 50. One.
Okay. 50. Gotcha. Super cool. Great question there. I'm trying to uncheck these as I go, so I don't.
I'm starring as I see them. So
cool. Richard says the near fields are no joke. Jonathan's setup is fantastic. Watch the takeoff of Interstellar. Felt like you're on the ship next to Matthew McConaughey. Absolutely. That was a crazy scene, dude. I think I was even upstairs for a bit, and I was talking to some folks, hanging out with them. And you kicked in that scene, and I'm like, I got to go see what this is. This is nuts.
Of course, Simon doesn't say anything about Jonathan's room. He only says it about my room in M-Wave. I get it. I see how it is. Just pick on the guy with the...
That was fun, man. So
hi, Richard, by the way. He's one of our new guys in the group, too. Not maybe in the last 6 months or so, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. So. Richard's a great dude, man. Definitely enjoyed hanging out with him at M-Wave. All right. So we got Christian says, in process to upgrade my home theater, evaluating the Golden Ear Triton 2 Plus. They use a different technology, adding a sub to the tower. What are your thoughts on that gear?
I'm not familiar with what they're doing.
I haven't ever reviewed or even heard any Golden Ear speakers, so I definitely can't comment on that. Jonathan, are you familiar with them?
I've heard some Golden Ear. I'm not familiar with the Triton 2. Let me look it up real quick, and I'll give you...
Supposedly they use a different subwoofer connection.
It's using a ribbon tweeter. It looks like
you can share.
That's the ribbon tweeter. The ribbon tweeter is typical for Golden Ear, though.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not going to comment on something that I don't know anything about.
And that's me. Yeah. So unfortunately, Christian, none of us have experienced that brand or that model. So, and I'm with Jonathan. I never like to give information that I'm just guessing on, because that doesn't benefit anybody. So, James, are Onwall speakers like KEF or Inwalls better?
That depends on the Inwall. Meaning, if it's an Inwall with its own cabinet, I'd probably say it's better. I'd still prefer an Onwall.
So you're talking about like what they call a back box, where it has its own backing, because like a lot of
custom back box that it's EQ'd and designed around, instead of using the space in between the joists as its backer.
Sure. So like Per Listen, when I did the Per Listen Insider. They flew me up there, had a cool video, had a chance to meet those guys. Great folks, incredible speakers. And one of the speakers that they were showcasing during that, it was kind of like a prototype. They were still working on it, but it was their Inwalls. And I don't think they haven't released those yet, have they?
No.
So they're still
very soon.
They're still like in production, but they have their own back box. And so I think they can control the sound more when they design it with their own speaker, because they should know pretty much how that speaker is going to sound.
Well, it's a controlled variable.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just relying on the uncertainty of what's in the wall.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you got anything? Thoughts? Same?
I have heard some Inwall setups that are impressive, but generally speaking, I'm going to fall in line with these guys and say that if you have the speaker outside the wall, you have the ability to aim it at your listening position more appropriately. It's a more controlled product, as Ryan was saying. There's benefits to just having the speaker itself if cosmetically it's okay.
Sure.
I mean, I definitely get the wife approval factor for Inwalls.
Yeah.
For
and
sure.
that's usually, a lot of times that's what it comes down to. It's like, man, they'd just be clean. It looks nice, and it does. But sometimes with that comes a sacrifice of sound. Charles Keene, brother, what is up? Charles, I did a home theater tour of his. He's in North Florida, and he makes some incredible speaker, let me think, acoustic panels, custom acoustic panels. The frame around it uses CNC machine and then fabric on the, dude, it's awesome. You got to check out his video. So REW has a feature that allows you to input your room's dimension, main listening position, location, and number of subwoofers, then calculates the optimum position for each subwoofer. It's a good starting point. Super
It's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, Doug from Kansas City, who you remember had put his subs in the ceiling. That came from that. That's where they were going to be the best. So he's like, all right, we're putting them there.
Jonathan, I don't know that it would have mattered where he put those subs.
I think he could have put them in his neighbor's house.
He
and
probably
still would have been able to enjoy them.
Oh my God. It sounded like the room, it felt like the room was breathing when we were there for a demo. Oh, and shockingly, I think that's actually how Doug listens to his setup.
Yeah, that wasn't run hot for guests. That's
no.
every day.
Yeah.
Oh,
too funny.
I got a funny story about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So do you remember, and maybe you guys don't remember because we were just there that short while, but above his kitchen, he has all these like fancy high-end plates and stuff that I think
I've heard this story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I looked up there one time when we were playing that music, and those plates are like jiggling like this, and I'm like, "What's going on with that?" And he goes, "I put them on springs because one of them fell off the boat."
No,
so all of the plates are on springs. Just
oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Hey, it's better than them dropping though, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, no, I didn't hear that story. That's fantastic. Jonathan, back to your question. On a tight budget with a 4K shift projector, has a good picture, but would a MadVR software running on a PC improve that image?
Yeah. Yes, Ryan, that's your ball.
Yes, no doubt.
What say ye?
So we did this in January with a 4K E shift. The Epson is actually still a 4K E shift, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even the LS 12,000. So it's still that way. The issue isn't the 4K E shift. The issue is how the projector handles tone mapping, right? So the Epsons do, and Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do like a static tone mapping approach. They don't do it dynamically like the JVCs and stuff do.
Correct.
So they have some shortcomings. But then if you go down, things that get even worse, like the older JVCs, like the 420 series and the on up, if you give those projectors good tone mapping, like on the MadVR or home theater PC or through an Envy, you'd be amazed at the difference that can make. I mean, we saw in January, and I still remember it happening, where the 420 tied the NZ8, and we were all confused about why that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were both running MadVR, but we had to run it 3 times because we couldn't believe what the outlook was. And that gives you, granted, it was on a much smaller screen, right? Because the 420 doesn't have the brightness, but it does have better contrast. So it comes down to, when you're doing external tone mapping, what the hardware capabilities of the display are instead of what the software limitations are.
Good word, man. Martin says, do you guys kill all possible sound before level matching or run room EQ? Or do you let some ambient sound go?
I turn off my HVAC. I wait till everyone's asleep. If any noise happens, I repeat that particular sample. You know, like on the newer Denons, they let you repeat that.
Yeah.
I don't want any disturbances affecting that.
And Jonathan, is it correct? I think you told me you even hold your breath while it's doing that, right? Just no sound at all in the room, man.
You just want it to be as quiet as possible.
His wife's asleep upstairs, and he's just giving her a massage using low frequency.
No, I mean, when you get a calibrated mic and you're watching those real-time sweeps, and you watch, you hear the dog walk across the floor upstairs, and you watch. There's peak SPL that surprises you how loud it really is, and it will affect the measurements. Even little noises you wouldn't think would. They go in the realm of doing it.
Yeah.
So yes.
And if you don't kill it, you want to have a certain degree of decibel separation between your noise floor and what your speaker's volume is. Otherwise, EQ is going to get messed up because it doesn't have enough difference to be able to tell what's what.
Christian, how do you set subwoofer distance when using multiple subwoofers connected with the mini DSP?
I don't know that one.
Yeah, there's a whole thread on that that's like a super great FAQ on AVS forum. I'd recommend you check that out for more details than we would even have time to speak on if we spent the whole hour on this. My front 5 subs run on subwoofer 1 out on the Denon. They're all the same time alignment. The rear 3 run as sub 2, so I don't time align them to that precision level. I know there are people that do, and REW will let you figure that out with the impulse response functionality, OmniMic as well. It's an involved process. Go to AVS forum, and I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat for you.
Super cool. Kyle says, what is the target that you use when you EQ? Do you use music or home theater?
Both.
I use close to the Harman curve. I actually use Storm's curve, which is slightly different, but it's pretty close to the Harman curve.
I use the Youthman curve. It's pretty great.
You got to publish that, man.
It's proprietary.
That's right. Martin says, when running auto room EQ or level matching, how quiet do you keep your room? Kind of the same thing. Wait until total silence. So, yes, we already hit that. All right, so I'm going to keep going. LA Space Boy, if you had to pick one movie to demo your system, both visually and for sound, what would that one movie be? Great question, man. So one for both. It's interesting because I know when I think about a lot of movies, certain ones I go to for sound and certain ones I go to for like visual appeal. But what would you recommend for both? What would be your go-to?
I'm looking in my Plex library right now.
He's cheating. I'm trying to think for both.
What have I done recently?
I don't know if I'd narrow it down for video and audio, but the top 3 that I enjoyed lately for just demos in general is that Blade Runner 2049, Gravity, and then that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Those are all 3 just fantastic, stellar showcases.
And I think even visually, the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that would be pretty cool too. I know, like for me, like I said, I don't know of one that is my go-to for both of those. I kind of, like I said, if I'm showing like, sometimes I'll go to Lucy, but I use that for visual. I love being able to see all the detail in Morgan Freeman's face. I love being able to see, like, it shows a close up of her eye a lot of times, and that's just a cool visual there. But like, I don't use that as a demo for audio, so I don't think I necessarily have one. Do you, Ryan?
What I've been using lately, and one that I really like as far as newer movies, is the city fight scene in Godzilla versus Kong.
Okay.
When Kong finds the axe in the subterranean Earth, there is so much color for highlights. There's darks. It's 4K UHD. The saturation's stunning. The sound is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great demo. Plus, it's really cool because it's new, right? Everybody's seen a lot of these demos a bajillion times, but getting something that's new, I think, can be very important.
Sure. So Redneck Tech 70 says, I'm thinking of updating my satellites with Emotiva's new B2 Plus, all main level speakers, and maybe even the Atmos. Do you guys think that's a good choice for home theater?
I don't know Emotiva.
Yeah, I've only heard, man, it's been years ago when they first came out with their speaker line. And I heard like just a 5-channel speaker. It wasn't the most ideal setup. So it wasn't super impressive to me. But like I said, the gentleman that I heard it, I don't think he was super deep into calibration. He was more of a 2-channel guy. So I haven't heard their new B2s or B2 Plus. I think having all your bed layer speakers the same, I think there's some definite value there. I mean, you can see behind Jonathan, he's got all of his speakers identical: Atmos, surrounds, sides, rears, even his LCR. They're all identical speakers. So there's definitely some value there. What I've always tried to tell people, if at all possible, try to go and listen to the brand that you're looking into. It's really difficult for you to ask somebody else, hey, what would I like, or what would sound good in my room? You really have to hear those for yourself, because you may love the sound of Emotiva, you may not like that, but the only way you'll know is if you hear them. So hopefully you've heard those, or something similar to that, so you can have an idea. Sometimes that's not possible, and then I know that's why you have to rely on, guys like me that make content, and we try to explain what we're hearing and how we experience it in our own setup, but it's going to be different in yours. So,
and Jonathan, if you posted a link, it didn't come through.
I just posted in the chat on the YouTube section.
Okay. So you can definitely go check it there.
Expona is a huge event, and they might have shrunk with COVID, but they'll probably be back. Emotiva always has a big stand there and has all their speakers demoed. So cool. And there's a lot of other companies that do too. Yeah. HSU, SVS, like a lot of internet direct companies, the darlings of the industry.
Yeah.
You can go there, spend $50 on a ticket, and hear a lot of things that day. So that's that's a good option as far as just kind of getting some exposure if you're brand new. And I fully agree with what Ryan was saying there, that just because Ryan likes a speaker, or I like a speaker, or Michael likes a speaker, the next person may not. I mean, I told Michael this story. We did a blind test between a JTR 212 and a SALC HTL2, I think it was.
Yeah.
Those are dramatically different sounding speakers. And I had a clear preference for one of them, like got chills multiple times and multiple tracks, like loved it. It was a blind test. There was probably 15 people in the room. And when we were done, I was thinking, all right, we're all in the same room. We're all hearing the same stuff. This is going to be a landslide. It wasn't. There was about half and half, or close to.
Yeah.
The people like both sounds.
Yep.
And so it really opened my eyes that there isn't really a best. There's what appeals to each of us.
That is correct. And I'm a firm believer of that as well. So definitely, if you can hear them, that would be great. If you can't, then, I mean, honestly, it's kind of a guess at that point. Alpha Mole says, what multi-channel amps do you like? Would like one that doesn't produce noise, hiss during quiet scenes. In my system, like Ryan has a stack of amplifiers. Jonathan has a stack of them. I don't have that luxury. I've got limited space in the front of my room, and I don't have really any space in the rear. So I have to kind of use a multi-channel amplifier. And I have the Monolith 11X. It's 11-channel amplifier. I love it. It's a beast. It has 200 watts by 3 up front, and then 100 watts for my side surrounds, rear surrounds, and then my 4 Atmos speakers. So I run everything off of that amp. I also reviewed an Emotiva XPA 11, and that was a solid amp. I didn't hear any difference between the two amps, but I went with the Monolith because it was kind of more balanced in the power distribution. The Emotiva has 300 watts by 3 up front, and then only 65 watts per channel to the side surrounds and rear surrounds and then your Atmos. So I wanted it kind of more balanced, and monolith amplifiers are actually designed by ATI, which they've been making amplifiers for a long time, and they're solid. So what other amplifiers, multi-channel amplifiers, would you guys recommend?
I think it depends on your need. How much power do you need? How many channels? I'm a firm believer in pro amps. I've done enough blind A/B comparisons to know that I can't tell the difference. And as long as the amp is a quality amplifier and it's delivering enough power and my speakers aren't pushing it into protection like they've been known to do, I'm a firm believer in, Crown, QSC, and Behringer, as long as they're pushing enough power, and as long as their noise floor is low enough.
So probably the one limitation, Alpha, you may be asking that because if you're like me, you're limited in space. You just don't have the ability to put 7 amplifiers in your setup.
But you don't need to, because QSC, Crown, and stuff, they offer multi-channel amplifiers.
Do they?
They do.
Okay.
And they can
Maybe
go
I
up
didn't know that.
They can go up quite a ways, and they have some tremendously powerful multi-channel amplifiers. Just depends on what you need and how deep your pocketbook is.
Are they like 7-channel, or are we talking even more
I think
than
they
that?
have some 7-channel amplifiers.
Okay. So maybe 5 or 7.
Mine are 8, so I have 2 8 channels to run on my JBLs.
Yeah. See, I didn't even know that. I thought you had. All right, very cool.
Another benefit to running pro amps and stuff, like with my QSCs, they're Class H, so I can get almost 2,000 watts a channel out of them, which is unheard of for normal home theater amps.
Yeah, you're not going to get that out of like
So
what I've got or Parasound.
It's very dependent on what you need.
Cool. Good stuff, man. Hopefully that's helpful to you. Eddie Grimm says, is the reference Premier line from Klipsch a worthy step up from the reference line in terms of price to performance? I have only heard the reference series, and I always say like this, the reference series. Klipsch used to have the Synergy series, which was their entry level. That was the one they sold at Best Buy. And then they had their reference series, which was the RF7 version. And then they had the Heritage for the most part. That was kind of the 3 main breakups. They got rid of the Synergy series. Those had silver woofers and drivers, and they replaced those for the most part with the new reference. I'm just not a super fan of those. I would 100%. I've reviewed the reference Premier line, the original, and Klipsch is sending me their new reference Premier, the updated ones. And so I'll have those in for review probably in the next month or so. But I like the reference Premier. I think they offer a huge value if you like the sound from Klipsch, and you like that detail and the clarity that they have and the dynamics that they produce. Some people don't like Klipsch, but I like the sound of Klipsch. But I think the reference Premier is a nice step up, both audibly but also even cosmetically. It just looks nicer, a lot cleaner. So have y'all had any experience with the reference Premier series or the reference series?
Not dedicated time, no.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully that helps, Eddie. All right, so we're going to try to stick to, we got 3 minutes. We're going to blow through this. So Pete Nevin says, should I use the distance of my center channel speaker that the room EQ gave it and then use that as the acoustic timing reference in REW to set the distance of the rest of the speakers?
Why not just use your AVR to set the distances? What are you worried about there?
Mm-hmm. And then just check it if you have a calibration mic.
But yeah,
I'd say try it with EQ, with room calibration, and then check it and make sure it did it right. And then you should be fine. It usually does distances pretty well.
Yeah, all of them seem to do distances pretty well, in my experience. And they might be a smidgen off, but they're a lot better than what a human ear can do usually.
Yeah, most people say that the distances are pretty accurate. It's the SPL levels that are off. DCAS, how do you run 3 subs out of 1 output? The simple answer, well,
multiple ways.
Do you use like a mini DSP in yours, Jonathan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
you can just, if you just want it to be simple, you can just use Y splitters.
Yeah,
you can split it.
But
twice.
you'd have to do it. Yeah, you'd have to do it twice, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah. So he's talking about using it'd be a male to 2 females.
Problem with that though is you can't independently calibrate them like you can with the mini DSP.
Correct. That'd be like 1 sub. Well, Jonathan, you mentioned you're running yours that way, right? They're just all together.
Yeah, I mean, in the banks. So the front bank of 5 is all just 1, and it's split 5 ways.
Yeah. So you got adapter after adapter after adapter, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, it works, dude. I've heard it. It's phenomenal. Last couple questions. Donald Fleming says, Mike and Ryan, nice to meet you at Audio Device Live. Pleasure to meet you too, man. Any particular company you like more for acoustic room treatments? I only have one that I've personally used, and that's GIK. I think as long as they're, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm going to show you this right here. most people kind of poo-poo the way Jonathan explains it. If you look to the right of his screen over there, so you can see the little acoustic panels. A lot of guys say, oh, those don't really do any difference or whatever. And, whatever. Jonathan, I've been in his room, man. His room sounds phenomenal. I think there's a lot of brands that you can go with, but any preference for you guys?
It depends on what you're trying to do, right? So if you're trying to treat low frequency, things can get really expensive really fast. My best suggestion there would be to make them yourself. GIK makes solid stuff. Acoustics makes solid stuff. As long as they're using good components and you know what you're getting and you know what components are in it, I don't know that there's really a bad one as long as it comes from a reputable company and you're using it in the proper way, right? Like Jonathan's, I think, like those, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, those are really there to treat high frequency reflections.
Yep.
Right. They're not going to do much for mids and nothing for your lows. So the thicker you make the panel and the denser it is to a point, the better, depending on the material.
Yeah.
So Jonathan has those for a very particular reason. But I think people have a tendency to glance over that a lot of times.
Kind of.
I like acoustics because they have a tendency to go very well with your room as far as design.
Yeah, aesthetically. So I know with I found this out when working with GIK. I didn't realize that even a 7-inch thick panel. So I'm thinking, man, that's got to do something for those low frequencies, right? I think they only handle down to about 200 hertz.
That's optimistic too. Yeah.
I was like, wow, man, I didn't, but the reason is your bass waves on lower frequencies are super long. Some of them are like 20 feet. So there's no panel out there that's going to really fix that.
I mean, you guys have seen the panels that I have in my room to try and tame some low frequency, and even at the lower frequencies, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. LA Spaceboy, do XLR cables have an advantage over RCAs when using amps to AVR or processor? A couple of advantages that I know of. You get, I think, 3 dB gain when you use XLR over RCA. Am I correct in that, fellas? Do y'all know?
It's not inherent in the cables. It's usually just the preamp stage is a little different on the XLR.
It can output a higher voltage level than it does for RCA.
So it's not the cable that makes that. It's the okay.
Right. So RCA is typically done at 0.7 or 1.2. Those are the kind of the two floating standards for that. Okay. And XLR can be 2 volts or 4 volts or 8 volts or 16. I mean, they go really high, right?
Gotcha.
Go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt. I was just kind of
no, dude. Trust me, you know more than I do. I think
so. Then the next thing would be that XLR is better for long runs because there's a grounded component to it, where RCA is just signal and ground. There's 3 different cables in an XLR, so you can run an XLR for 50 foot with no problem.
Yeah.
And if you run an RCA with 50 foot, you're going to get hum.
Yeah.
But at short distances,
you can get hum short distances depending on the interference level.
Yeah.
Correct. If you're running a lot of power wires or something like that, you can get it. But at 2, 3, even 6 foot, as long as your gain structure is matched, you're not going to be able to tell a difference.
Nope.
And so if your amps are next to your AVR processor, you're fine to go either way.
Yep.
Cool. Good question. Last couple here and we'll wrap up. 49ers, do you guys think JVC is the new king of projectors, or Sony still the king? I love this question. We had a chance at M-Wave as well as, well, not so much at Audio Advice, but we had them in 2 different rooms at Audio Advice. And at M-Wave, we literally put them side by side. My eyes, most of the time, I preferred the JVC. But there are certain things that the Sonys did better than the JVC. It wasn't like the JVC would just blew the Sony away. It just had certain elements that were better. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Since I work for a video company, I'm going to refrain from this.
They both have their applications, I think. So
yeah, the JVC typically has the dynamic tone mapping, and that's really strong, and they have the best black levels. And I don't think it's just the new king. I think they've been that place for probably the last 3 or 4 generations. If you're strictly talking about black levels and dynamic tone mapping, at least 2 generations. As far as in bright content, the Sony and the Epson both can hang just fine at the JVC. And if you didn't know what was what in a different room, I don't think you'd know. In fact, that little demo we did at the M-Wave tour where we had
I got it wrong, man. Yeah,
the 5040 versus the NZ7. That's a $11,000 projector versus a $1,200 reverb that's 5 years old. And we did a clip with Bright Content, and I had the premium ticket holders from Emwave vote by show of hands, and it was a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
So
and I was the guy that got it wrong.
Well, and it's not just you, because Stop the FOMO even said out loud, he said, look, until one clip in this particular 4-minute long clip, I thought I liked the other one better, but I knew from my experience in this industry that that clip was handled better by the other one. So I voted for the other one, even though I even kind of liked the other one better.
Gotcha.
So this mountain of like absolutely everything else sucks except for one brand is just not right. There's a couple torture test scenes that you can kind of make that kind of argument, and everything else is going to be like, this is really good.
Yeah, real world scenario. You're not, most of the time, what we found with Emwave, we put 2 projectors side by side, and I had people looking at both of them and say, okay, there's better blacks over here, but I would 100% any day of the week take that one as well. I mean, these are, we live in a great day because the technology is just so incredible, and our projectors look really, really great, even with some budget friendly ones. Last question here, and we're going to wrap this up. Ender, what is the price point on projectors where diminishing returns sets in? This is a good question. Is it 5,000, 10,000, 15, 25? You guys have seen them all, so thought you'd be the best people to ask. Great question, man.
That's
law
a subjective question.
Law of diminishing returns is in every aspect of life, whether you're talking Rolex or not Rolex,
especially
time
in this
watches
generation, man.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, all you can answer is that subjective, because that's a subjective question. For me, it's 3.5 probably, because it'd be the Epson 50-50. I think that's like, you can't get the 50-40 anymore unless you buy it refurbished. It's not for sale.
Yeah.
The 50-50 is the earliest model that's still for sale, and it costs $3,000, $3,500 in that range.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic image.
Sure.
It's going to go toe to toe on anything bright with everything else out there. It's gonna lose in the darkest of content, but it's going to be a picture that everyone that comes over is going to see. This is better than anything I've ever seen in commercial cinema, and it looks really great. And it goes up from there, right? So now you're going to pay $10,000 for a Sony or JVC. That's like a tick up, and that's just what it is.
Yep,
that's my opinion.
Yep, I was actually going to say the 50-40. After that, it's diminishing returns. But
sure, if you can get a 50-40, I agree with that too. And you remap everything to SDR, it looks really fantastic. But it's harder to find them now.
But like you said, it's very subjective. It depends on what you value and what's important to you. Because if you find that you really value contrast, then that's probably not going to do it for you.
Correct.
But if you just wanted an overall good enough experience, then yeah, it's going to be phenomenal. I mean, we saw what happened at Emwave when we put the LS12000 against the NZ8 with proper software for tone mapping. The hardware at some point stops mattering because the tone mapping and proper reproduction of the image outweighs everything. So if you're able to combine things with like the free version of Mad VR on a home theater PC, then you're going to be able to compete with projectors that are 15 times that price point.
For sure, man. Well, guys, I know we're right at over an hour. Ryan, you've got a meeting to go to. Jonathan, it's been awesome having you on here, man. I've always loved your heart, and you are a wealth of knowledge. And so you're always welcome back on the live stream anytime. We'd love to have you.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Even though it was like 30 minutes before the show. Like, hey, see if Jonathan wants to join us. He's like, yeah, let's do it, man. Let's make this thing happen. So we're grateful that you did. Well, guys, I hope you have an incredible week. If you've got any needs for home theater, definitely you can hit the wrong one. You can reach out to Ryan, shoot him an email. He's a vendor for, or not vendor, but a dealer for a lot of different brands, great brands. And if you're going to be at CEDIA, I'd love to hang out with you. I'm going to be doing some video shoots for a bunch of different companies, about 8 different companies there. But hopefully that last day I'll have some free time. So if you're going to CEDIA, definitely let me know, and I'd love to connect with you if I can. So guys, we'll wrap it up here. Hope you have an incredible week. We'll catch you in the next live stream, which are we going to do it on Sunday?
Sure.
I'll let you know in the on the YouTube community. So all right, guys, y'all have a great week. Take care.